Welcome, dear students. The focus of the current session is national and international context to exemplify synchronic changes. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you will have a grasp over the basic concepts related to synchronic linguistics, and you would, through the examples, be able to understand how a synchronic study can be carried out. Well, my dear students, for a synchronic study in linguistics, the comparisons are to be made at a particular time point, and I hope you already know that. I assume you have a clear understanding of that. However, what kind of comparisons can be made? I cannot give you all the possible examples under the sun. But what I would do is, I would just pick up a couple of languages and would give you some examples. So the first, example that I would explain is through Australian variety of English language. So, for example, if a synchronic linguist wants to study language at a certain time point and interests in, or takes interest in Australian English, he or she can study, for example, the vocabulary of Australian English language by making a comparison and a contrast with, for instance, British English or the American English vocabulary. Here on the screen, you can quickly see, for example, a couple of examples from Australian English vocabulary that are unique to Australian English. Sangar or sanga, that is used for a sandwich, or a prang, that actually means a minor car accident. Now, a synchronic linguist can compare this kind of use of vocabulary, can identify which particular words are used in Australian English, which are different from American English or from the British English. Now, if a synchronic linguist is interested in phonology and still wants to work on Australian variety of English, he or she can probably look at the phonology of Australian English in comparison and contrast with the British or the American varieties of English. In fact, Australian English has the same inventory of phonemes as RP, that is the received pronunciation that we have in British Standard English. But nearly all the vowels are realized differently. So, this can be field of study, this can be a point of study for a synchronic linguist to see how these vowels are realized differently by the Australian speakers. Or even, within Australia, because again, it's a huge continent, how, whether there are possibilities or not of variation of this realization of, these vowels. Generally speaking, however, because Australian variety is quite homogeneous, so, for example, a and a are closer in Australian pronunciation as compared to the British, received pronunciation. So, to the English ears, Australian pan sounds like pen, because Australians would produce it like pen instead of pan. There can be comparisons, not necessarily with Australian English. A linguist can synchronically maybe look at a comparison or a contrast between the American English and the British English. For example, the R sound in general American English and in received pronunciation, that is shown here with RP. If we compare that, in general American pronunciation, the letter R is pronounced in all positions. But in received British pronunciation, it is pronounced only before vowels such as very or paragraph. Here it is pronounced, but for example, for the word word, it is not pronounced as word. It is pronounced as word, and it is not also pronounced, for example, verb. It's not pronounced as verb. R is not pronounced in British English, whereas it is pronounced in American English. All right, if a synchronic linguist is not interested in making comparison with other languages or with other varieties or dialects, there is a possibility that within one, variety of language, ethnic varieties of the language can be seen. For example, in American English, there are further sub-varieties within that on the basis of culture or ethnicity. These cultural dialects, can be explored, can be compared, can be contrasted, can be studied in their own standing as standalone. For example, African American vernacular, or Cajun vernacular, or Hawaiian pidgin, or Latino vernacular Englishes, or, for instance, Chicano English. Miami English is another example, by the way. If still a synchronic linguist is not interested in the cultural and ethnic varieties, he or she may be interested in, how at a certain time point, regional and local varieties of American English, they vary from one region to the other. So, for example, according to different regions, it can be studied as Eastern New England region, Boston region, Rhode Island, Southeast super region, Midland, etc. What I would like you now to think of South Asian English, the English that is spoken in South Asia, which includes Pakistan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, etc. I would like you to think of the Pakistani variety as well. How far Pakistani variety is similar or different at this time point from the Indian variety? What are the features that distinguish it from all the other South Asian varieties? These can be the questions that a synchronic linguist can consider.